most of the voters are, they make an informed decision before they go into that booth and make the vote on the budget and the school board election.
Hi there, it's WAMC News Director Ian Pickus. And on this episode of the WAMC News Podcast, my conversation with the head of the New York State School Boards Association. Well, New Yorkers voted last week for public school budgets and Board of Education candidates in a year when national issues divided many local communities. Turnout was sharply up in many districts, and according to the School Boards Association, 99% of district budgets were approved, including a handful that overrode the tax cap. Here's my conversation with Association Executive Director Bob Schneider. How does this year's outcome statewide compare to other years?
Well, since the tax cap was enacted back in 2012, we have seen a high passage rate of school district budgets throughout the state, usually in that 99, 97, 98% range. And those passage rates are attributable to the majority of the school districts in the state staying at or below the 2% tax cap. We have a handful of school district 17 this year that went for the override vote, if you will, where 60% of the voting community has to approve the budget, and the override is overriding the tax cap of 2%. Interestingly enough, for those 17 districts statewide, 88% of them were passed, and that's a record.
Remind us of how it works for that handful of districts that did not approve a budget. Now what happens?
Well, they get this next chance at getting a budget pass occurs on June 21st. The school district and the administrators will present a new budget to the community on the 21st of June, and then they'll get a second shot at the community can vote for budget approval. And what we've seen historically there, most of those second votes, a large majority of them get approved.
And if they don't, then the districts are back to a contingent budget?
Yeah, it's a contingency budget. So that's kind of a bare bones budget, if you will, comparable to the prior year. So that is not really a good spot for a district to be in, because especially in this situation where costs are rising and also most school districts are continuing to restore important programs and services for their students. So with costs rising and restoring based on the cuts that might have happened during COVID, it would be unfortunate if they would be at that contingency budget level.
Is it fair to say that the tax cap is having the desired effect?
It's a good question. I think so, as far as, it's a more stable predictor of what tax costs will be for the member, and it helps on the state aid side also. But there are certain situations where we see that the tax cap formula needs to be changed. We know certain districts in that override group had negative tax caps, a certain revenue line item like a payment in lieu of taxes or a capital debt project payment comes off the books, and they're forced to be in a negative tax cap situation where they have to increase their taxes significantly. We do have to watch moving forward. I hope this inflationary situation is temporary. I don't know if it is, but then you really got to look at that from a different perspective. Is 2% enough to cover all these costs? School districts are doing so much for their community and for their students. There's a lot of costs involved in day-to-day operations of a school district. Just take mental health as an example. There's a lot of students that need supports during the day in the school building. There needs to be more counselors, more psychologists, and there's all these other programs that are so important for the future of this state and this country. We've got a learning loss situation. It's an opportunity to invest in these students that don't have either the computers or the bandwidth necessary for them to learn in an optimal setting. So we have to be very aware of those cost in that school district and what drives them, and is the tax cap enough in the future to sustain that?
What role is the increase in state investment in education spending in Governor Hochul's first budget, which was approved earlier this spring, having on school districts?
Well, the budget she put forward was similar to what the legislature approved. One of the interesting things that Governor Hochul had mentioned is that the state is in a situation right now, at least, that they're predicting a reserve into the future, several years out. If you remember, prior to COVID, the governor was mentioning that they were in a budget deficit. So that role, hopefully, we can maintain, with fiscal soundness, statewide and revenues coming in, that we can continue to fund the new baseline, if you will, and support our school districts. You remember the funding scenario, there was really three parts to it that resulted in this increase in funding around the state. You had the federal stimulus money, and we know that's going away in a couple of years. You had the regular state aid budget increase and funding from the budget, but then the foundation aid was now being paid that it was due school districts around the state. That's money that was due districts from many years back. We've had 2 years of that being paid. It's broken out 3 installment payments. The last one will be next year, and that was a significant move by the governor, where we have that money that was due us to support, once again, the communities, the school districts, and the students in those districts.
Let's change gears now and talk about the elections for school boards. This got a lot of national attention this year, given the fact that school boards, curricula, school board meetings have become sort of more partisan than maybe we're used to. What can you tell us about Tuesday's results?
Well, what we saw was there were more. We see there's more groups that are focusing in on supporting candidate elections, but the results showed differently. We did see some candidates that were supported by newer groups that have popped up. They eventually they were voted in, but for the most part, a lot of them were not voted in. And couple that with the fact that there was large voter turnout, that makes me feel good, because when there's greater voter turnout, the community's coming out to vote, and I think most of the voters are they make an informed decision before they go into that booth and make the vote on the budget and the school board election. But we did see some of them get through. But keep in mind, we've always seen certain groups will come forth based on issues and support candidates. I mean, we saw that back with the Common Core. There were fiscal watchdog groups in the past. So our job, our role is, once these folks get on the board, we bring them in, and we hopefully they will avail themselves of the services we offer to train them and inform them on what it means to be a school board member versus maybe someone coming in with a single agenda item on their checklist, and they're going to be serving a board for 3 years at least, and they're going to be working with a team of board members and a superintendent as a collaborative unit. So we're hopefully can support that, and they'll see as they come on to that board what's involved there. But we are glad that we saw, when there's enough candidates to run for school board, which there are, that's great news. And we have, constantly new school board members coming on school boards around the state, and we're here to assist them. Well,
what are the differences between running for school board and being on a school board?
The differences are running for a school board, obviously, you only, if you do your homework, you're going to take a look and see at what's involved in being a school board member, and then you make that decision, do I want to invest this time and effort into this? Now, this is a very important cause for every community in this state and in this country. Being a school board member is an important role, and it's an incredible give back. Once they get on that school board, well, they're going to probably commit about 15 to 20 hours a month working on their school board work. Also, they're going to be attending school board meetings once or twice a month at least, so there's time involved. But also, they have to be involved in making key decisions. But school boards, what they do and what they're responsible for is establishing policy for the overall school district operation. They hire a superintendent. They evaluate that superintendent every year. They put forth that budget to the community to vote. They get involved in collective bargaining agreement negotiations. There's a lot of things they do at a certain level, so they do those things. But as you know, in the past couple of years, there's been some heated situations in certain pockets of the state and the country where community members were angry about certain things that, quite frankly, the school board did not have a role in. And I'm hopeful that starts going away and we all focus in on the important things that are happening in school districts to support those students, to make sure they get the best education, all of them get the best education they can get in the system, and then they become, successful and contributors to the country as a whole in the future when they're adults.
Well, that's Bob Schneider, and he is the New York State School Boards Association Executive Director, talking about Tuesday's results. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you, Ian. Take care.
All right, that does it for this episode of the WAMC News Podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, I'm Ian Pickus.